Hello and welcome back to my channel. In this video we'll discuss some of the things you need to think about when buying a vintage sewing machine. We'll start with the obvious. Why do you want a vintage sewing machine? There may be many reasons and this will affect your choice of machine. If you want a machine for decorative purposes, this will narrow your search down to the pretty machines with fine decals and good finish. There are some very decorative early machines, but these machines are harder to find parts for. If the machine's only going to be used to dress a shelf, it may not matter that it's missing a bobbin case or a needle clamp. If you want a machine to use, you may not be so worried about its appearance and more about its capabilities. If you want a machine to restore, you may want to start with one of the more common models, which are often cheaper and parts are easier to source. Ideal first machines for those who are new to vintage sewing machines are Singer models 15, 66 and 99. These can be picked up for as little as £20, but at this price they're likely to need some work. They're easy to find, relatively cheap, easy to work on, and are robust and reliable, as well as producing a beautiful stitch. While these are straight stitch only, there are attachments available to make them do zigzag and even buttonholes. Decide if you want a treadle machine, a hand cranked or an electric machine. Is portability a factor? In the UK, treadle machines are more sought after, while in the States the hand cranked machines often carry a premium. Singer 99s are a popular portable machine, although they are still very heavy. The most sought after portable machines is the 221 or 222 Singer Featherweight, although prices for these run into the hundreds. If you're looking for an electric machine, remember that these will have old wiring, and they may even need to be completely rewired. Do you need a reverse or back tack function? Many early machines do not have this. Do your research. Google and YouTube are great resources. There are many Facebook groups about vintage sewing machines, and there's a wealth of knowledge to tap into there. So, where to buy? The obvious place is eBay, but beware, prices are very often inflated on eBay. Gumtree and Facebook Marketplace are great for finding those machines that have been sat languishing under somebody's stairs for decades, and they're usually a decent price. Charity shops and car boot sales may also be a good source for vintage sewing machines. Be aware that often adverts for vintage sewing machines will say that they are rare, when in fact the machines were made in their tens of thousands, and a surprising amount of them still survive. They may also be described as semi-industrial. There's no such thing as semi-industrial. There are industrial and then there are domestic machines. Most vintage sewing machines you will find are domestic models, and while they will handle far heavier fabrics than modern machines, they were designed for home use. With the appropriate needle and thread, many vintage sewing machines will cope with sewing lightweight leather, but for anything heavier, you're going to need a specialised industrial machine. So you've decided on your particular model, done your research and found one that takes your fancy in an advert. What now? Check the advert thoroughly and look at the photos to make sure nothing obvious is missing. Singer 15s, 66s and 99s often have the bobbin cover plate missing, which is no big deal as replacements are relatively easy to find. Missing bobbin cases may be a different matter. There are a couple of different types of bobbin cases for the Singer 15, and they're cheap and easy to source. If the bobbin case is missing on a featherweight, then it's a different matter. Genuine replacement bobbin cases may set you back £75 or more. Reproduction bobbin cases are available for these, but people have found them not to work very well. It's always better to get genuine original parts for vintage sewing machines. Modern reproduction replacements aren't manufactured to the same standards and are often problematic. See if you can spot any damage. Wooden cases are relatively easy to repair and refinish, but damage to the machine itself is not, especially to the delicate decals. The piece of cloth wrapped over the arm like this indicates it may have been used by a professional seamstress. The cloth is used as a pincushion, underneath may be damaged by the pins in what's known as pin rash. What accessories come with a machine? A good number of original bobbins is always a good find. Original bobbins always work far better than modern reproductions. Vintage sewing machines were engineered to a high standard, and so were the bobbins. They were machined to quite tight tolerances. Modern bobbins are mass-produced to a price point, and are of a much lower standard, often meaning they just won't work with vintage sewing machines. Original attachments in their box are also good. Some of the rarer attachments may be more valuable than the machine itself. Is there a manual with it? These are also good finds, but they're not a deal breaker. Manuals are often available free to download online. If it's electric, is the foot pedal and power cord present? Replacement cords and pedals are often more expensive than the machine. Ask if the machine works. The seller may say that they're not a sewer, so they've not tried, but the needle goes up and down. This is good as it shows the machine isn't frozen from years of solidified sewing machine oil. That said, a frozen machine can work again, but it can take some time and effort to get it to do so. Sometimes the seller will say that the hand wheel spins, but the needle doesn't go up and down. This could be something as simple as the stop motion knob or clutch being disengaged. And don't be put off by a dirty machine, especially if it's in a treadle. Treadle machines often gain a thick layer of grime when they're folded down. Sewing machine oil runs when the machine is tipped forward, and this mixed with dust and dirt can harden and make the machine look ready for the scrap pile. Patience and cleaning with nothing but sewing machine oil can bring these machine heads back to their former glory. So, you've got your machine at home, what now? First things first, if it's an electric machine, do not plug it in. Old wiring and outdated safety standards can make a sewing machine a death trap. First, visually check the wiring for nicks and breaks. If there's any exposed wires, take it to someone qualified to be rewired. Check that the wires are supple and not brittle. Next, check the plug. I've picked up machines with the old style round pin plugs, which went out of use in the late 60s. This tells me that the machine hasn't been used in almost 50 years. Check the fuse in the plug. It should be no more than 3 amp. People often mistakenly put a 13 amp fuse in, either because the machine kept blowing the 3 amp fuse, in which case there's a problem that needs to be addressed, or a 13 amp fuse is all they had to hand. Either way it's dangerous and it should be replaced with a 3 amp fuse straight away. Old sewing machine foot pedals were often made of Bakelite, an early form of plastic. This can get brittle and break. The foot pedals work by carbon resistance and can get quite warm when operated. The electricity is passed through a stack of carbon discs. When the foot pedal is operated, these discs are squeezed closer together and there's less resistance, meaning the motor runs faster. When running at slow speeds, excess electricity is turned into heat. While this is nothing to be worried about, if the pedal gets excessively hot, then there's a problem. The foot pedals often contain a capacitor, which was used to suppress interference on old television sets. Old capacitors go bad, and if the machine has not been used in a while, they can blow. If this happens, there may be a huge bang, and the machine will run full speed on its own. You might hear a sizzling or bubbling noise before this happens. The good news is that these can be removed as they're no longer needed, as signals for modern digital televisions aren't affected by this interference. There may be a capacitor in the motor itself or in the machine itself, and I would recommend removing these. If there is little speed control from the foot pedal, it may need adjusting and cleaning. Modern machine foot pedals use complicated electronics to regulate the speed of the machine, and these don't get warm. You can get modern electronic replacement foot pedals that will work with vintage machines. If you're unsure in any way, get a professional to check it out. It's always better to be safe than sorry. If your machine is not hardwired, that is, the foot pedal and the power lead plug into the machine, it's good practice to plug in the leads to the machine first, before plugging it into the power outlet. I always plug vintage sewing machines into a safety power breaker or RCD adapter. It's also good practice to unplug the machine if you're not using it for more than a couple of minutes. This will help the pedal stay cool. If your machine has come with a bent wood case, never use a handle on top to carry the machine. It only holds the machine with a latch and a lock, and as wood gets older, it gets weaker. These points may fail, resulting in a damaged machine and possibly broken toes. The keys to these locks are often missing, but you can use a small flat blade screwdriver to lock and unlock these. Throw away any old reels of thread that came with the machine. Thread degrades over time and will snap easily, causing all sorts of problems. Of course, if these are vintage threads on decorative spools, you might want to keep them for display purposes. Similarly, take the thread off any bobbins that came with it. You've no idea how long that thread's been on there. Thread will absorb moisture and can cause the bobbins to rust. You might find that there are many layers of thread on each bobbin. This is also bad practice. Winding new thread on old will cause the bobbin to wind unevenly and can affect the tension of the bobbin thread and ultimately the quality of your machine stitches. So when you're finished with your bobbin, take the thread off. Check the drive or treadle belt. Treadle belts are usually made of leather and rot relatively easily. New treadle belts are cheap and available online or at any good sewing machine repair shop, and the same with motor drive belts. Check the rubber tyre on the bobbin winder. These again perish and may have a flat spot if the machine's been stored with the winder engaged. Check the machine to make sure that everything moves as it should. If it doesn't, don't force it. Always turn the hand wheel towards you. There are a very few machines where the hand wheel is turned the other way. Turning the hand wheel the wrong way will result in thread getting tangled up in the bobbin area. It's important to follow this rule, especially with treadle machines. When you start to treadle, the wheel can spin in any direction. Get into the habit of starting your treadle machine off by hand by spinning the hand wheel towards you. Similarly, stop it by hand to prevent the treadle wheel from rocking back. It may be tempting to turn the hand wheel back on machines that do not have a reverse or a back tack function, but don't. There are various ways to lock the start and end stitches. Turning the work around is one of them. Take out the old needle and throw it away. You don't know how old it is, whether there's any damage or corrosion on it, or if it's bent. Needles are consumables and should be replaced regularly. If you've got a manual, read it. This will tell you how to maintain your machine, which is simpler than you may think. Unlike modern machines, vintage sewing machines were designed to be maintained by the user and really don't need servicing. Regular cleaning and oiling is all that's needed. Take off the access plates, brush out any lint, especially around the bobbin and feed dog areas, and put a drop of oil in all the oiling ports, and anywhere that you can see that metal moves against metal. Never run the machine with the presser foot down with no fabric under it. This will cause the feed dogs to gouge marks in the bottom of the presser foot, and these can snag on your fabric. Vintage machines were designed to use parallel wound or stacked spools, and these sit on a vertical spool pin. It's a good idea to use spool felt underneath it. This adds a bit of friction and stops the spool from spinning wildly, which can result in tangles. Modern spools are often cross-wound. They don't sit well on spool pins, unwind unevenly, and often result in thread getting wrapped around the spool pin. Cross-wound spools are designed to be used mounted on horizontal spool pins, and the thread is pulled off from the top. The spool doesn't actually spin. This doesn't mean you can't use cross-wound threads with your vintage machine, but you'll need a separate thread stand that lifts the thread up from the spool. Thread stands are inexpensive and you can make your own simply enough. This also means you can use thread on a comb. When you finish with your machine, place a piece of fabric under the presser foot and store the machine with the presser foot and the needle down. On a final note, be prepared for your first vintage sewing machine not to be your last. People have found collecting vintage sewing machines soon becomes an addiction. There are many vintage sewing machine groups on social media like Facebook where you can find support from people who also suffer from this affliction. I hope you found this video to be useful. If you have, please give it a like. and check if you've subscribed to my channel. If you haven't, please do so. Thanks for watching.